Hi everyone, Avin Ruby here from Ellisport. I'm really excited today to have Daniel joining us. Daniel is an attorney who's based in France, although he is American. So he's got a really interesting backstory. Daniel, could you maybe spend 30 seconds quickly going through your backstory? Because I was fascinated by it when we were just talking prior to this. And I know the viewers will also love to hear this as well.
Sure thing. So I am originally from San Diego, California, where I was born and raised in a very American setting, not international, not speaking foreign languages, but I was wanting to go abroad with my sights, set on France. And I lived in about 8 different countries and did a lot of studies with the goal of ending up in France, being able to practice law here in France, which I'm now able to do, and that's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, my major goal is helping people to be able to move to France and being their link to help bring them in. So I love what I do.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. What language do you speak quickly?
So I speak French. I had to have a good enough level of French to take the bar, so that went well. My fiance is German, so every day I study that nowadays. Obviously English, and then I speak Spanish and Italian. And I tried a handful of others, but they didn't work out too well.
Yeah, I feel like you're stacking on the language department. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's going to screw up my Mensa application.
Okay, first of all, how's everything in France right now? You're based in Paris, so you're right in the heart of everything. How's the sentiment in France? How are people doing?
On the whole, well, since the March 16th,
Do they still have lockdown?
Yes. Yeah, it's a very serious lockdown. It's been in place now for 4 weeks. On Monday, Macron spoke and prolonged it until May 11th. So we know that we will be in total confinement, which is, borders are closed unless you've got, and I'm happy to go into detail more in a second about that. But prefectures are closed, consulates are closed, everything is shut down, and you have to have an attestation if you go outside. You have to date it, put the hour, give your motivation. You cannot go further than 1 kilometer. You cannot do, running in Paris from 10 to 19 o'clock. So it's very strict setting, probably some of the most strict in the world right now. But besides that, there is a good spirit. I think people still do clap at the window every night at 8 p.m., which is kind of their communal howl and gets the emotions out. So the spirit is high, and we're hoping that people will stick with it until we get rid of this disease.
Now, let's jump into some of the updates from an immigration perspective. How have the policies in France changed as a result of the coronavirus? You touched on one of the changes briefly, the borders being closed. What are some of the other changes?
So yes, as I noted, the borders have been closed. The only people that can come in are those who have a valid visa, and that they have the primary residence in France.
And that can be non-EU as well.
Right. Yeah. So if, for example, you are a long-term resident in France and we're off in, the Philippines for a week, and then you're still able to fly back into France. And I think most of the people have already done that by this point.
Are there quarantine requirements?
Yes. It's going to be a matter of self-quarantine for 14 days, but confinement is quarantine at this point. So that's not really going to be changed. Now, you had a question about changing immigration policies. One of the best things that France has put into place was an automatic prolongation of everyone's status if it was expiring from March 16th, 2020 until May 15th, 2020. And that's both visas and residency permits. The only difference between the visa is the sticker in your passport, and the residency permit is the card in your pocket. So we know that there is a 2-month window. Just show it off my own residency permit in this country. We know that there is an automatic prolongation of that for 3 months. What we don't know is what will happen for those who have statuses expiring in June or July of this year. Will it be that the prefectures reopen in later May, and that all of a sudden we expect the prefecture to handle everybody, a massive influx? I think that's unrealistic, and I think the government will be aware of that. So,
now, if you do have to renew your work permit, residence permit, do you have continued work authorization while that's pending, or do you have to stop working?
Excellent question, and they did not address that question. On our side, our firm's been scrambling to figure out the answer to that because it's important. One of our clients was on a short-term work visa that expired during that time window. So we've written to the French Labor Authority. On one of the French prefecture's websites, they implicitly stated that the prolongation is also in place for work authorization. So I'm operating under the assumption that yes, work authorization continues to be prolonged if the visa authorized it. It is critical to know that there are protections in place for those who are on French labor contracts. So France is a country with a strong social network. And if you have to step back from your work because there is not enough trésorerie, there's not enough finances within the company to afford to pay you, what ends up happening is that there's basically a partial unemployment regime where you step back and you are not working and your company pays you 84% of what you'd be earning, and then the state then reimburses the company. And that's what a large proportion of companies are facing right now. Then there's different ways of mixing it where the companies are doing partial unemployment in that you are still working maybe 50% of the time, and so you still get some of your real salary and some of it is that unemployment benefits. And that's the way that France is avoiding having the unemployment figures that you might be seeing in the US. It gets more...
And something in the UK as well, we're seeing the furlough program. So, I mean, it's really great to see these governments stepping up and helping support the workforce. In the US perspective, having furloughs or layoffs can impact employers' ability to sponsor employees in the future for certain types of immigration benefits. Are there any impacts from the French immigration perspective that employers should be aware of with regards to the furloughs and layoffs?
We haven't seen any, and I think due to the fact that this is an exceptional circumstance, I think that there's going to be a lot of leniency on the part of the French government. We're already seeing that leniency in place, as I mentioned before, with the automatic 3-month prolongation. And it goes even further when it comes to folks that are in France on basically just a tourist stay, a Schengen visa exempt stay. They're able to temporarily convert themselves onto a visa status just to be able to continue legally staying in the country. So I'm seeing the French administration bend over, not necessarily bend over backwards, but be very flexible and adaptive to this, extenuating circumstances. When it comes to companies and respecting French corporate law, I'm assuming that what the French government will do will be a matter of leniency, being able to make loans that might be able to convert into grants. That's the kind of extra mile that the companies will need the government to do in order to survive this period, especially as it goes longer and longer.
Absolutely. You touched on the Schengen visas. So anyone that is currently in France and cannot leave, they will be able to convert their status into a longer term stay, is that correct?
Yes, so what France wants to see happen is that as you start to approach your 90th day within the Schengen zone, that you send off an email, and it depends, in France it's basically broken down, the country's broken down into departments, and each one has their corresponding prefecture. And so you contact the corresponding prefecture with an email, stating your passport, a photocopy, a proof of entry, proof of residency in France, and then the reason why you couldn't leave France. And then they should be granting you a temporary visa, a C visa. Okay. Whether or not they get around to it, with the agents of the prefecture not being able to access their computers, with the whole country shut down, I'd be surprised if France has reacted, but it may just be that you're getting your foot in the door, footnoting that you have tried to file for the document. That's what's important. Yeah, so it's going to be complicated to figure out what will happen for those that are in France at the end of the summer. Let's say that you've got a visa that's expiring in July, and maybe it's not renewable, and you're not sure what your rights are. It's going to be a bit of a waiting game for us to see how France will be giving work authorization, giving prolongation of the right to reside in France. But the good news is that France has been relatively upfront about that. There's been good communication coming out of the president and out of the Ministry of the Interior. There's less good communication coming out from the prefectures. So at the local level, they're not getting out the word about what the rights of the immigrants are, but the Ministry of the Interior is. So it's, I think it comes down to a question of leadership. In a crisis, are they able to show honesty and transparency? I think those are the key values that we need to see right now out of the French government. And for the most part, we are seeing that.
Fantastic. Now, can you just quickly going to the relationship between, you said there's the interior ministry and then the prefects. What's the relationship there from an immigration perspective?
So in France, it's not like in the US where there's the federal and the state levels. In France, it's all a centralized country. So what's decisions that are made out of Paris end up impacting all the different localities. The Ministry of the Interior controls the prefectures. So within each prefecture, there's the préfet, the prefect, that makes the decisions for their prefecture. And so basically there's national rules that are put into place, and then the prefectures will locally put into application those rules. So basically adapt to how the national government has reacted.
In terms of obtaining employers looking to recruit new employees, how is that going to work? What we've seen is in the US, you can still file applications and petitions for new employees. You can't premium process them, but this may be a good opportunity for some employers who are looking to forecast and plan for the next 6 or 8 months, maybe to file a work permit on behalf of somebody. Can they still do that?
At this point, there's no actions that they can take. So if you are a company and you're looking to expand, it's unfortunately a bit of a wait and see to see at what point the country reopens. If after May 11th it starts to progressively reopen within the borders, then maybe the prefectures and those who are already in France, the foreigners already in France, will be able to get hired, compared to if you're trying to bring in somebody from India or from the US, they're going to be blocked at the border until the consulates reopen and until France decides, or the Schengen area decides, how they're going to let in people based off of country, based off of immunity. There's a lot of unknown factors. And until we get a vaccine, there will not be any easy answers to those questions. So in terms of growth, it's hard to predict. I like to think that half of my role in this job is to be a crystal ball and try to figure out how the French government will react. The fact is, with this new plot twist of a pandemic, we don't know how the government will react, other than to say, based off of prior incidents, is how they've proceeded. But it's not too comparable to what's going on right now.
Right. Absolutely. Now, we're going to push very quickly into some top tips for HR mobility folk. What would you be recommending to any immigration mobility or HR professionals in terms of what to focus on during this period of time?
Yes, well, I can speak from the experience of what we're going through. I collaborate closely with Expat Partners, which is a French international mobility company. It's mostly French inbound, but it's also a global practice. And as you know, in the immigration sector, everything is basically closed down. If the borders are closed, if the consulates are closed, there's not much to do in terms of typical busy work. So it permits us to have a moment to step back and reflect on our mission and on the kind of work that we want to do. In terms of my own professionalization, I know immigration, in France like the back of my hand, but there's more aspects of French fiscal policy that I'm curious about. French, labor law, penal code. So I'm taking this as an occasion for me to work on my formation. That's the French, formation is the French word for training, to develop my skill sets. I think that you and I are both doing this right now. My second point is strengthening of the professional network. I think that I have definitely not done this enough before the crisis happened because I didn't need to. Being in Paris and being in immigration, it feels, to use a bad metaphor, like shooting fish in a barrel. Like I don't have to do any advertising or any promotion whatsoever to get the word out, to have clients come to me, because everyone knows an immigrant, everyone needs assistance. And yet there might be a utility in working on my promotional skills, learning how to better manage social media or LinkedIn, and work on promoting the name of the company. If you do that, then once business reopens, maybe you'll be able to draw more of a focus to your company and have that grow. And the last thing that I'm trying to do in this moment is I had a folder in my email that I haven't touched for a year that's called back burner. And every time I know something is good, but I should be working on it, but I don't have time, I just put into the back burner folder. And now's the time to open the back burner and see, what are the projects that I've been sitting on, a book about French immigration. Maybe this is the time to sit down and write it. So trying to seize the moment and realizing that productivity can be used in more than one way.
Excellent. So, it seems like France has got some great initiatives. they've got the automatic extension for work permits. We don't know how that's going to look in the middle of summer. And then there's also concerns with when the consulates will reopen and the borders will reopen there, which looks like there's a long road ahead for France, but obviously you've got a great government in place that are helping out the workforce there. So a lot of good news stories, and thank you for sharing those top tips. I think they're really important. I know we've, as a firm, jumped into a lot of those back burner projects that we've had as well. And this is a great time to kind of put everyone's minds, the best minds together, to go ahead and try and crack those. So thank you, Daniel, for your time. If anybody wants to get in touch with you to learn more about updates in the French immigration system, how can they do that?
Yes, I would love to receive any kind of inquiries. They can contact me at my email address, daniel@danieltostado.com. I'll send you that to you so you can stick that in the body of the message. But yes, in general, people send an inquiry, and I'm happy to respond to inquiries, reactively. And then if they want further information, we do a consultation.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Stay safe out there, and we'll stay in touch. Hopefully you'll learn like maybe 3 or 4 more languages by the time you next speak.
Thank you, Arvinder. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.